What's he building in there? What's he building in there? We have a right to know.
All right, welcome everyone to episode 15 of Reframing the Narrative. And this is a unique episode for us this week as we had a guest lined up and we were trying desperately to get him on. Unfortunately, technical difficulties prevented that, and we'll have to reschedule with him for another day and time. I think that's going to be a great conversation. But of course, Jake and I are never at a lack of words or thoughts. And we thought, well, we're here in front of the camera and the microphone. Let's just do it and wing it and see what happens. So as always, I hope our viewers and listeners enjoy the ride, as these are all unscripted anyway. So there's really not too much different, except we don't have a third person in the room. So Jake, I know that you have had some thoughts based on recent experiences over the past week or so. Maybe it'll develop into a theme and in something that will resonate with our listeners. So Jake, good to see you again. Why don't you cue it up and share some of those thoughts?
Thanks, PJ. Good to be back and good to be rolling and impromptu with reframing the unscripted narrative here. So, I find it interesting how a lot of times you might have something on your mind, or maybe something just sticks there and you make a mental note, and then something might happen that ties in with that in your daily life, or you might encounter some kind of situation that reinforces it or underscores it. And so just in my daily goings on recently, I encountered a couple situations where I think the theme would be alienation and a little bit of maybe division, not just a little bit of division, but this accentuation of division, and also at the same time more of a siloing or compartmentalization of the way we live has been dividing us, which is ironic because in the internet age, we always see these advertisements and the buzzwords are all bringing people together, right, with technology. But are we really seeing that when we look at ourselves and examine how we feel interacting on social media, or even just going to your own YouTube channel? If you're logged in, you've got your cookies set and the algorithm remembers you and it feeds you back dopamine hits, essentially based on what you have watched in the past and what it is guessing is kind of hot on your stove at the moment. And of course, if you continue ignoring a certain theme, it'll kind of drop off the algorithm. And I've noticed that happens. So if you don't want to feed it, don't feed it. Just don't click. Don't do it. Anyway, in real life, this came to the fore recently. I met somebody by chance, a young man who came up to me as I was working, and we had a conversation. And of all things, the hook that got us talking a little deeper than what you doing, nice day, isn't it, was Chinese technology, because I was using some kind of a Chinese device, a drone actually. And I mentioned something about China and said, yeah, this whole tariff thing is kind of crazy. And I'm not afraid of Chinese technology. In this particular company, DJI is the leading consumer, prosumer, and professional drone brand that's not military technology, that's available to us muggles. And he picked up on that, and we started talking about social credit and all sorts of like where China is kind of got it right, where they don't, and things like that. And it really came out that he feels, as a 23-year-old young man just graduated from college, he's having a hard time as somebody who is looking beyond the parapet of what he's been taught and conditioned to think and do and see. He mentioned how hard it is, how he feels so divided among his neighbors and alienated from his peers, young people. He's He's just a motivated person who's got a good upbringing, good education, and is, I would say, a self-starter. I could tell that was in his blood, and I learned a little bit about his family. And he might even listen to this episode, so shout out to Khalil, inspiring guy. And I told him, I said, I'm really interested in seeing where you go, having this consciousness and grappling with it and struggling, just not being dejected by what you see out in the world. How are you going to navigate this? And I said, I'm an older dude. I'm not telling you how things are. That's not what I'm about. That's not what we're about on this podcast. But it's something I am keenly interested in observing, and hopefully we can find solutions to this, whether it's being alienated from people online or the division that we see, starting with party lines, racial division, economic division, ideology, all those things out in the political world. And of course, I don't really buy into the political division because it's basically just a clown show to me. So I thought that would be an interesting topic just to broach a little bit, and maybe you can pick up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot to unpack there. I would say that my initial reaction to all that is, especially for a guy as young as this gentleman, Khalil, that you mentioned, is to have that vision and sight to see the world as it is, or see more of the world. He, like many of us, is probably still discovering things all the time, and so I don't think any of us ever fully see the picture together or know everything there is to know, because that's impossible. But anyway, that is to say that I think very few people generally choose to put on the glasses from They Live and see the subliminal programming behind. In your case, you wear the glasses all the time, Jake, but very few people choose to put those glasses on the first time and see the world as it is. And that's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And as you mentioned, then integrating back into the society that, is just going along to get along, and is happy with whatever narratives they've been given and general direction for what they're supposed to do with their life and the traditional formulas of everything. That's really difficult and just underscores the importance of community, as we've talked about in the past. Even just when we were talking to Michael Jaguar and how he and his co-founder created a community of like-minded people, and certainly we all didn't agree on everything, but there was a common energy and a common ethos about living freely and seeing the world for what it is, and exploring and learning. I mean, I even mentioned that in one or more of those gatherings, that's where I started having discussions about True Earth and what the potential reality there is. And I grew just having discussions with people like that, and we grow together and just sharing information, and not just letting someone talk, but actually listening. And I think that's really key, because how many times are you in a conversation, or have you been in a conversation in the past, where you're just waiting for the other person to stop talking so that you can insert your ideas and your thoughts, right? So really listening to each other, I think, solves a lot of issues, but it is really important to be able to find those people who will listen to you and hear those perspectives and can resonate with you in some way. And I think one of the things you shared with me off air is just, how many, and you elaborated on a little bit, how many ways there are out there to divide us, whether it's, as you say, the algorithm on your YouTube feed or whatever social that you're on. It's who you choose to select to speak with or spend time with. It's the activities. I mean, there's just so many different ways for you to be drawn into a very niche circumstance. And even if you look at the television programming, that even creates so many different genres where people find themselves in a very specific place, in a very specific mindset, and all that is there to fill up your time. Really kind of expanding on the idea of what we've touched on quite a few times in our broadcasts is, where you're paying attention. And there's no limit of places for you to pay your attention and have your time sucked up. And we often do this voluntarily, especially after a long day. I think you said something about this last week. It's so true. Like sometimes you just want to turn your brain off and, go with whatever time wasting, brain dead thing that it is that gives you pleasure. And, I think there's balance in life, but I always think every time I give into that, like, gosh, look at all this stuff I could have done, all these ways I could have grown. And all of that is really important. But yeah, I'd say this is just a long-winded response to, it's quite challenging to see the world without, the rose-colored glasses and understand the different darkness that exists out there. And then how do you process that, and how do you share that with people? How do you find like minds? Like all those things are really important. And then, just I think it's really important, whether it's discussing a new idea with someone or something that might be new to them, or even just debating some of the sub genre and some sub details of, some of the big conspiracy topics, like whatever the case may be. It's really important that people are listening to each other versus like, I'm in this camp, and if you're not in this camp, then I'm not interested in what you have to say. And that's where a lot of division happens. And I'll actually say, just as a further extension of this, just timely to the conversation we're having today, I happened to watch, I think it was maybe last night or the night before, a recent episode of Understanding Conspiracy where Paul had the theme, and this is part of his Tips for Truthers series. He basically said something to the effect of, don't get caught in that one thing, or don't be a one-trick pony. And he was saying this for the benefit of others, and also, for himself, to remind himself, like, you're not just the Nephilim clown guy, you're not just the millennial rain guy. Like, there's so many things that we can be learning and be sharing with each other and be talking about. And just as an extension of everything that I just said previously, like, yeah, I mean, I'll take the video that I'm working on as a perfect example. Like, I'm working on this video talking about like germ theory and virology and some of the chicanery that happened in what's considered established science, and how many people just go headlong into the germ theory topic. And it's like, if you're not into this, then you're not a real truther, and the same respect people have had that stance about, the shape of the earth or Mandela effect or Tartaria, all of that, like whatever the topic du jour is, people get so pigeonholed into one thing. And it's like, well, there's so many pieces of the puzzle. So don't get stuck in that one moment, to paraphrase what you said last week, quoting our favorite Freemason, Bono. Don't get stuck in that one moment. There's so much to learn and experience and do. And also just to learn from others and hear what they have to say.
I really like that you emphasized listening, because that's one thing that we can always learn from other people, even if we totally disagree. We're still learning from them what's on their mind if we care about them. If we don't care about them, then we can learn about maybe not how they think if they're unthinking, but what is in their head and why that may be important to other people, or maybe at some point how, from a communication standpoint, to reach other people that seem unreachable. Maybe you just have to connect with them on some other level and get beyond whatever that little crux is, that little impediment is. And you touched on something else that I often wonder about, like, why do we even have genres? Those divide people too. Like, you can have people who be like, oh, I'm a jazz man, I'd never listen to country music. And then like you go to the horse's mouth, someone like Miles Davis, he's like, jazz, that's some jive ass MF came up with that word. I'm not a jazz musician, I'm a good musician. And if you listen to the actual musicians, they don't want to be typecast. They don't want to be like, I'm just heavy metal, I'm just rock and roll. Well, maybe rock and roll, they're like, yeah, I'm a rocker. But other than that, people with a little bit of range to their art, they don't want to be typecast like that. Just like the term conspiracy theorist and that description, it allows people to be lazy in approaching the subject and the topic and the people involved, because they can say, oh, that's just for marginal people. It's crazy. It's whatever the CIA has done to make certain people look bad. And if you Google it, like the Flat Earth Society, that's going to be the first thing that comes up, and they make it look bad. They poison the well. So do we really need these labels? But another thing that I think we're kind of butting up against in what we're doing here is it feeds on what Michael Jaguar asked during our discussion. He asked the question, can you name any utopian movies? Remember that? And I said, do you mean dystopian? He's like, no, utopian. And the answer is, And in a similar vein, can you name a lot of pro, whatever it is, pro this, pro that, taking action, saying no is also kind of a proactive approach. So I'll include that in there. But it's really easy to have a podcast, to start a movement and be against something. So I'm against all the conspiracies. I'm against other people of other backgrounds, other ideologies, other political parties and affiliations, other communities from other, across the borders. It's easy to be against something, but it's a lot harder to be for something and get beyond that inertia of constantly railing against something. And the audience is really there. I'll be frank. I don't expect to ever be a huge podcast, because it's a lot easier for listeners to be like, I'm against the deep state, the New World Order, the frogs turning gay. Go to the front page of Rumble if you've ever watched. Well, for me personally, I get all these what I would call patriotard kind of suggestions, and I don't even click on them, but maybe that's just kind of, I hope I didn't offend anyone on Rumble, but they're typecasting. They're putting people in their silo, and it's a certain type of person that probably feels comfortable there. But when you go beyond that and you extend a hand to people that aren't exactly in line with you, then what happens? Well, the unknown happens, and people don't like the unknown. They like something that's comfortable and amplifies and magnifies their self-image. And that's what we're in now. Especially we're seeing that in society, people only hanging out with people who agree with them, or people who are just like TikTokers or whatever. They have the same hobbies. And then we're seeing it definitely on the internet and then with social media. And so where are those hands being extended to cross these barriers? That's the question that I'd like to know. And then, of course, there's the intergenerational gaps that we see. And we've had manufactured generation gaps ever since, probably since the radio days, even before television. But I don't think it's a mistake when you have, look what came before the Beatles, right? It was mostly black rock and roll. Then that gets co-opted by Elvis, and you have the Elvis genre kind of, and then the Beatles come along, and we know, we've discussed them. That's kind of a manufactured movement. And the people that were into the music that came before the Beatles had opinions about the Beatles. Well, you young people, you're going for those long hairs, those mop tops. And that's like the first, you can just pinpoint exactly what happened when they went on Ed Sullivan. And an entire generation of people that weren't listening to the Beatles was alienated from those younger people. And the younger people said, well, that's who we identify with. And they went with it. And then you saw with the hippies, the flower power generation, that alienated a whole other generation of older people who weren't aboard or didn't buy into it. And then it just keeps going. And we've seen the conditioning of young people with social media, with the, from one app to the next. And now we're on to the TikTok era with whatever's going on TikTok. And I'll never be on TikTok, so I don't know what's going on TikTok. I do see the clips, but uh, so yeah, that's my fascination in this conversation, and something I really don't want to fall victim to, getting stuck in my own algorithm, so to speak, whether it's online or in real life. So what do we do?
There's the black pill aspect of all this where you can get sucked into gloom and doom, and we've talked about that in the past, but how many people are actually doing something about name your topic? And as you were talking about that, it made me think about like how recently I had stumbled across the content creator. I think somewhere I was already subscribed to him from years ago, but there's a guy named Mouthy Buddha who put out this series called Pedogate, and talking about many of the issues that I think people in the truth world are aware of, but it was a reminder of some of that darkness that exists behind curtains and closed doors. And I remember when that movie came out, what was it, a year or two ago, Sound of Freedom, that kind of touched on some of those same topics. And I feel like that got people riled up, and when I think about it, it likely was probably part of the political process to get a certain segment of the left right divide really fired up, and then the other side's, oh, that none of that stuff is true, and everyone doubles down and digs their heels in the political divide. I don't know that there were anybody, or there were that many people out there who were like, well, let me go to an orphanage, or let me go adopt a child and get them out of the system. How many people did that versus just like writing comments on social media and flinging accusations at different politicians? Like, it was just I think at the end of the day, that movie really just served as a division tool. I don't think it really called anyone to action. And I think these things exist on so many levels and in so many genres. And yeah, I think your point about music is a good one too. I mean, I've seen that and experienced that myself. And as I've gotten older and grown a little bit wiser, I've seen those traps that I had fallen into. That I was a metal guy for a while, and anything that wasn't metal was weak. And then I pick your genre that I got into, everything else is crap. Like, we're all just kind of conditioned to think that way, versus like, there's something to be learned in all different types of music or art. And you're better when you're diverse, and you pull from a lot of different sources and assimilate that into your own unique mind. And yeah, so I think part of the action, the immediate action, is just reminding yourself to be open-minded to others and to hear what they have to say. That feels like a real solution to me. But then I think it is like, what are real practical steps if something bothers you that you want to do something about? And there's a number of ways that can happen. I mean, I'll say that in just an example from my point of view. um, One thing that really bothers me, and I'll give a shout out to the agent we talk about all the time. He did a really great series on the dark arts of alchemy and how those contributed to pharmakia and ultimately what we call modern medicine. And that opened my eyes to the whole practice of vivisection, and that just really disturbed me, like how much that was involved, and still is in many respects today, in animal testing and all the cruelty that happens to animals that very few are aware of. And when I think about what can I do about that, well, one, I can treat my own animals extra nice and have sympathy for animals who didn't get that type of treatment. But beyond that, I think, from my point of view, and it's something that I've been working hard on, documenting a lot of the chicanery that went on during Pasteur's days and beyond, documenting that for other people to be aware that this happened and continues to happen. And there's actually no reason for it. Like, it was literal torture of animals, if you look back at those experiments. So for me, what can I do about it? I can make others aware about it. And then enough of us know about it, then we can start real action. I myself can do very little about that, but I think as a larger community, we can say, we can start boycotting. We can do a number of things. We can hit the people who are doing this where it hurts by just not participating in some way, shape, or form. But as we talked about last week, there's other smaller solutions, saying no, using cash when you can, and anything that's like one little bit of resistance at a time. But I think it's wise for us to reflect on, okay, so we learned this thing. Great. That's knowledge. Knowledge is great. But if it kind of irks you in some way, so what are you going to do about that? How are you going to change the world in some way? And there's no set answer for anything. It's just more to reflect on and figure out what your little contribution could be. And enough of those contributions turns into really big action.
Exactly. And it's funny because you probably saw me kind of cheering just now when I made a mental note. But what I wanted to say was, think of yourself maybe not as a conspiracy theorist or whatever kind of label it is, or a lot of people throw around the term I'm awake or something like when did you wake up? What about just thinking of yourself as open-minded and open to situations and open to other people, and not putting up your garlic and your cross and your holy water when you see somebody that you identify as a possible vampire, just who's actually not actively harming anybody. So don't go ahead and think of them as the enemy. You can have interesting and fruitful exchanges with people. And the more people that may have a little bit of maybe non-mainstream fringe kind of ideas in their heads and beliefs are able to interact with muggles, with people who are what we would call normies, the more they're going to be willing to listen when we do open our mouths, because you've established some credibility with them. And maybe your exchange with them is just limited. Like we've talked before, Mr. Cubicle and Norma Normie. It's fine. Just have a pleasant experience and exchange with them. But if you should ever get beyond that surface level in the pleasantries, then you've already primed them for something else and they might actually listen. And I've found that in my experience. Like, we don't use our real names on this podcast, but I've been kind of approaching the subject of this podcast with some people I would consider very mainstream recently, and they're more open to the ideas because we're not identifying as a label. So it's a lot easier to invite people in. And I think we can apply that beyond podcasts and beyond anything online and put that into practice in our real life. And as far as taking action, maybe people want to feel like, well, I've got to start some kind of movement. I need to organize or something of that sort. But I think action does, it has all sorts of faces and it answers to all descriptions, and it doesn't have to be a movement, but you can build a community. Look at the community through which we met. It was essentially a homeschooling community. And politically, I don't think those people saw eye to eye on a lot of stuff. They saw eye to eye on the freedom to homeschool and get out of my kids' veins and don't put a face diaper on them. And that's where they agreed. And some people even showed up with face diapers to our gatherings, and we didn't shame them or anything. We're just like, no, that's cool. If you want to wear it, you're welcome. But we're not doing that around here. We're not encouraging that. And if that had taken place during a different time, it might not have ever gotten off the ground because of cultural or political or other divides. But just that gives us that kind of a reminder that community can form just from one little kernel. And that's a good lesson to learn. So anyone that has felt like they should start some kind of thing, look, go ballroom dancing. If that's your thing, you could start a ballroom dancing community of people that dance to gay frogs, gay frog music,
Dance to the beat of your own drum, for sure.
Dance to the rivets of gay frogs. There you go. Instead of the rhythms. I always fall back on that one. Thank you, Alex. I'll always love you. Bill
Oh,
Hicks.
man. Yeah. One of Bill's greatest hits.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that you make some really good points there, and just to reiterate what I said last week too is just, when you do have those conversations with people, don't go making big bold claims that assume they see the punchline in advance. I think you have to be prepared to walk people down the path of how you got there, and your logic, and viewing things a certain way, and hear them, so you listen to what they have to say. But it can be something as simple as, and you and I had a good laugh about this yesterday offline, but pointing out the fake, what is it, blue
Blue
rocket,
Origin.
or Blue Origin. Yeah, how fake was that, right? And it's like, even if people aren't there to say that space is fake and gay, you could point out the fact that the door opened before Jeff Bezos came to officially open it. Like, there's just some of those things. It's like, well, does that seem weird to you? Because why would they fake that then? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. And if
starting
one part
points
is fake, then what's real, right?
right. Link that to the moon landing. How real did that all look? That technology that was so painful to rebuild, that basically is shower curtains and aluminum foil. But we'd be back on the moon in a nanosecond if they could figure out how to put those things back together.
Yes, but it's such a painful process. Such a shame. And now they're just sending up probes like every other day. It's like, oh, well, we're not going to bother covering this live because we've got this lunar probe that's going to go there, and we'll get the little Atari graphics showing that it landed okay. And then they never follow up on it. It's always like, we've gone there and they're doing research and we never see a follow up. It's so funny.
It does make you wonder if there's a return to trying to get people on board with space and space exploration, if that's part of the 2025 agenda. Not sure I really know what the end goal is there, but just something to keep an eye on for sure.
Well, doesn't Katy Perry even have a song called E.T.?
That wouldn't surprise me.
And I think she said stuff about like being friends with our alien friends or something. So it could be part of like, I don't even want to speculate, but we know there is kind of an alien agenda. Shout out to the great researcher and author, late Jim Marrs, who wrote a book called The Alien Agenda, one of the originals. And I think they still might be following that in some capacity, in some respects. So yeah, we're getting into Blue Origin and all the fake space programs now, but maybe that's some way to reach out to people. And just, if you have normie friends, or just post it to your own Instagram, like, I came across this and this looked just so ridiculous. What is Jeff Bezos doing with this door special tooling opener? And then the door opens and then the handler says, oh, wait, no, you jumped the gun. And then they cut away, and then they cut back when he's got the tool. And that's after he fell on his face, by the way. So that was good for a laugh as well. But all this stuff, I think laughter and humor is always a good entry rather than hitting people with really heavy topics. So any opportunity you have to use levity, go for it. Show people, make fun of it. And if people make fun of it, you for bringing it up, it's just like, well, it's all in good fun, mate.
Totally agreed with that. And yeah, I think just on another note, just thinking about the golden age of 2025, I do kind of wonder if, maybe the push towards space and alien agenda is queuing up the big grandmaster leader, whatever that person is supposed to be called. Who knows? I'm speculating. Maybe 2025 will come and go and nothing big happened and we all breathe a sigh of relief. But then I can't say that that's totally true, because we've all been feeling the pain of governmental chicanery and messing with the economy. Probably a controlled demolition there, but yeah, I think it's probably too early, just being in April, for us to be talking about there was nothing that really happened in 2025. So
Way too
yeah, I
early.
guess, yeah, probably stay tuned and keep your head on a swivel. Who knows what's coming next?
Yeah, I have noticed. Just today, I was consulting with someone doing some technical consulting on like podcasting, video gear, things like that, and I recommended a certain device, and I said, "Oh yeah, it's only like $3.99." And I went on Amazon to, speaking of Jeff Bezos, how you doing, Jeff? And it was like $6.99, and the person that I was next to on the computer is like, "Yeah, tariffs." So it's like, man, all bets are off right now as far as the economy. You're just hearing it in the air about the stock market, and the market is uncertain, and that has so many knock-on effects with real estate and everything. So, yeah, just a reminder to everybody: just stay grounded with what you know is real and know is true, and seek out those connections with people that you know are real and true as well, because that's the main thing we always fall back on. So all this cyberspace stuff, all this generation gap stuff, don't take it too seriously. If you can.
Yeah, and I mean, you've said it best in a past episode that at the end of the day, when things get really bad, it's your neighbor that you go borrow some butter from, or that you share some of your supplies. It's all of us together that'll make it through all of this. Your friends, your family, your neighbors, and so don't look at those people as your enemies, even if they don't share the same viewpoint as you. Look at them as your allies and fellow humans, and try to learn and grow together.
Really good point. And that allows us to come full circle to the context under which I met Khalil the other day. His family's been in that particular neighborhood for over 50 years. And that's one reason why this topic really surfaced for me, was they were remarking about the division among neighbors. You might have somebody who literally parked at the curb and ran into their house the entire time they lived there. And this is not a dangerous area. It wasn't because it was South Africa and they could have gotten kidnapped at a certain bad point in history. And then another neighbor who just keeps to himself and they're putting up fences, and people are putting up shrubbery so that no one can see them, and they conversely can't see their neighbors. And so we're just seeing on all these different levels, physical as well, in this one block where we met and where we had a great conversation. It's top of mind at the moment, all the division. And, to quote another, hopefully not a Freemason, but another musician, I'm a lover, not a fighter. So I'd prefer to unite people rather than make them feel really bad and scared and divide them. And I think that's what we're all about here at Reframing the Narrative.
I totally agree, but I have to burst your bubble that Michael was also part of the One Eye Club.
No, I'm gonna moonwalk out of here now.
You should watch my video about the Masons. I'm sure I've got at least one image of him given the vow of silence, or the one eye, or hidden hand, or all the above. I'm not sure. I don't remember now, but.
Well, to tie into a pretty prominent conspiracy theory, which I like I said, I don't like the word, but Michael, I know you're alive. So, you faked your death. So I hope you're listening. And if you are, you can feel free to come on. We'll have you. You might be named Davy Dave or something like that. And you can set the record straight, whether you're a member of the One Eye Club or not. So we'll always welcome Michael on. He can moonwalk on into our show.
Absolutely. And I've seen his alternate ego, and he has a really sharp suit. So we'll have to dress up if he comes on.
All right. Well, looking forward, speaking of coming on the show, hopefully next time we'll have a special guest that will not have technical issues, and we can look forward to a couple great episodes. Do you want to maybe not name names, but kind of mention the theme that we might be pursuing over the next couple of weeks? Because it's pretty
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. We're working hard on getting a couple folks that I think many of our listeners will be familiar with, and both of them have been very active in the freedom world and community, and just working on securing a rescheduled date for one, and we got another one on the books. But I would say that, we'll probably be looking at activism as a pretty key theme, kind of tying back to, well, what are we going to do? Both of the gentlemen that we've been talking to are well known for their activism. So, and some of that having to do with homeschooling and getting out of the indoctrination centers. Others just more awareness and getting people, energized to go, do their own thing and buck the system a little bit. And then, yeah, the gentleman we had to reschedule with today was really keen on talking about just all the things that have come to light in recent years, and how there does seem to be an expansion of consciousness, that we're all, quote unquote, waking up now in a way that never happened before. And certainly part of that was kicked off by the scamdemic in 2020. But even now we're seeing levels of awareness that very few would have ever expected. And just as an example of that, I believe now even Joe Rogan is aware of the idea of the little season that we're potentially living in, and the past millennial reign. It was Eddie Bravo who talked to Paul from
Full
Understanding
stops, yep.
talked to Paul from Understanding Conspiracy. Like that's on the verge of going viral as an idea. So I just feel like there's so much knowledge out there that's being shared and being absorbed, and maybe this is preparing us for the next stage and whatever comes next, like more of us being aware and seeing through, the traps and seeing through all the deception. Maybe it's building up the army to resist whatever that next step is, and that's, exciting times ahead for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of being open-minded, that's really touching on expanded consciousness and maybe embracing what's next, because it is coming no matter what. So yeah, prepare yourself by being open to it and building those relationships as you can, whether online or in real life, preferably in real life. And I think we'll leave it there for this week. You want to take us home?
Yeah, I'll just say that even though we are continuing to work to try to get people onto this show, and hopefully before you know it, we'll have a string of guests, and it'll seem like Jake and I as a dynamic duo was a thing of the past. But always happy to jump on and have a conversation like this, and always enjoy those. But certainly I'm going to continue having my call out, and especially you Rumble viewers, we know you're out there, we know you're listening. Find us. I think we've got our contact on the YouTube page. I'm not sure how well we're described in Rumble, but we can look at that.
Oh, sorry. We have a Gmail account. You can always send a Gmail. It's reframingthenarrativepod@gmail.com.
We also have reframing the narrative at protonmail.com as well.
Okay. Yeah, Proton Mail, preferable to Google, so go for it.
But let's make sure that we put it in the description, since we brought it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely get in touch. Again, the person we had scheduled today was another person we know in real life. You don't have to be famous or have done anything that's been in news headlines. Like, just come on here and have a chat with us. We'd love it, and just get another perspective. So until the next time, reach out, stay in touch, like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and we'll see you next week.
Peace out. Take care of yourself.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage. You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe.